Wow, Cassie, what am I seeing? What is this? Lady shouted, and the next thing she fainted. Cassie's parents were always busy with work, leaving their children to fend for themselves. They had a houseboy, Emma, who was supposed to take care of the children, but he had other plans. Emma, who was in his early 20s, has been working for Cassie's family for a few years. He was charming and friendly, but he wasn't what he seems to be. He had a penchant for young boys and he saw Cassie as the perfect target. Cassie was just 11 years old when Emma started molesting him. At first, it was just small touches and caresses, but soon it escalated to full-blown sexual abuse. Cassie was confused and scared, but he didn't know how to tell his parents. Cassie's parents were too busy to notice what was going on. They were always traveling for work, leaving Emma in charge of the children. Emma took advantage of their absence to continue his abuse of Cassie. As the years went by, Cassie became withdrawn and isolated. He stopped playing with his friends and lost interest in school. His parents thought he was just going through a phase, but in reality, he was struggling to cope with the trauma he had experienced. Cassie's parents never suspected that anything was wrong. They thought Emma was a trustworthy and loyal employee, but in reality, he was a monster who had destroyed their son's childhood. As Cassie grew older, he began to realize that he was different from other boys. He had no interest in girls and he felt uncomfortable around them. He didn't know why he felt this way, but he knew it was connected to the abuse he had suffered. Cassie's parents were oblivious to their son's struggles. They thought he was just shy and introverted, but in reality, he was hiding a deep secret. They never asked him about his feelings or his relationships, and he never volunteered the information. Years went by and Cassie became a young man. His parents started pressurizing him to get married, but he refused. He didn't want to get married and he didn't want to have children. His parents didn't understand why he felt this way, but they continued to pressure him. One day, Cassie's parents introduced him to a beautiful young woman named Ndidi. She was kind, intelligent, and charming, and Cassie's parents thought she was the perfect match for their son. But Cassie was not interested. He didn't want to get married, and he didn't want to have anything to do with Ndidi. Despite Cassie's reluctance, his parents continued to pressure him. They told him that he needed to get married and have children, that it was his duty as a man. Cassie felt trapped and suffocated, but he didn't know how to escape. In desperation, Cassie's parents turned to Lily's family for help. They asked them to persuade Cassie to marry Lily, and they agreed. Lily's family was wealthy and influential, and they had connections with Cassie's family. Under pressure from both families, Cassie finally agreed to marry Lily. The wedding was a grand affair with hundreds of guests in attendance. Cassie's parents were overjoyed, but Cassie was miserable. He didn't want to be married and he didn't want to have anything to do with Ndidi. After the wedding, Cassie and Ndidi moved into a new house. Cassie's parents had bought it for them and they had furnished it with expensive furniture and appliances. But Cassie was not interested in any of it. He just wanted to be left alone. Didi tried to make the best of the situation. She cooked and cleaned and she tried to persuade Cassie to consummate the marriage, but Cassie was not interested. He avoided her and he refused to touch her. Didi was confused and frustrated. She didn't understand why Cassie was behaving this way and she didn't know how to change him. She tried to talk to him, but he just shut her down. As the days turned into weeks, Didi became desperate. She decided to take the laws into her own hands. She wanted Cassie to make love to her. She turned to Cassie's parents for help, but they just told her to be patient. One day, they decided to take matters into her own hands. She drugged Cassie's food, and when he fell asleep, she crawled into bed with him. Cassie was unconscious, but she didn't care. She just wanted to consummate the marriage, no matter what. The next morning, Cassie woke up feeling groggy and disoriented. He didn't remember what had happened the night before, but he knew something was wrong. Lily was smiling at him and she looked triumphant. What happened last night? Cassie asked, his voice shaking with anger. Lily just smiled and said, "We consummated the marriage." Cassie was furious. He couldn't believe that Lily had drugged him and taken advantage of him. He felt violated and betrayed. How could you do this to me? Cassie shouted, his anger boiling over. I didn't want to marry you and I didn't want to sleep with you. He had no right to do that. Didi just shrugged and said, I did what I had to do. You are my husband now and I need to make sure that our marriage is consummated. Cassie was horrified. He couldn't believe that Didi was so callous and manipulative. He realized that he had made a terrible mistake by marrying her. As days went by, Cassie became increasingly withdrawn. He stopped talking to Didi and stopped leaving the house. He just wanted to be left alone. Didi tried to reach out to him, but Cassie pushed her away. He didn't want anything to do with her. One day, they discovered that she was pregnant. She was overjoyed and immediately told Cassie, but Cassie was not happy. He didn't want to be a father and he didn't want to have anything to do with Didi or the baby. As the pregnancy progressed, Cassie became increasingly distant. He stopped talking to her and stopped leaving the house. He just wanted to be left alone. Didi tried to reach out to him, but Cassie pushed her away. He didn't want anything to do with her or the baby. One day, Didi saw something that changed her life forever. She saw Cassie kissing his best friend Ruby. She realized that Cassie was gay and that he had never been interested in her. Didi was shocked and confused. She didn't know what to do or how to react. She had never suspected that Cassie was gay and she didn't know how to process this new information. As she watched Cassie and Obi together, she realized that she had been living a lie. She had married a man who don't love her and she had tried to force him to be something he was not. Didi felt a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, and regret. She didn't know what to do or how to move forward. She just knew that she had to get out of the marriage and start a new life. And that was how she fainted. After she woke up, she started to process her emotions and try to figure out what to do next. Cassie's health began to decline all of a sudden. He became sick, but no one knew what was wrong with him. Cassie's parents took him to see doctors and specialists, but no one could diagnose his illness. They tried traditional medicine and spiritual healing, but nothing seemed to work. As Cassie's condition worsened, they realized that she would still had feelings for him. She didn't know if she could ever forgive him for what he had done to her, but she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Cassie called Ndidi to his bedside. He was weak and frail, and he knew that he didn't have much time left. Ndidi, I'm sorry, Cassie whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I was wrong to marry you and to pretend to be something I'm not. It was taken aback by Cassie's apology. She didn't know what to say or how to react. Why did you do it? Ndidi asked, her voice shaking with emotion. Why did you marry me and pretend to be straight? Cassie sighed and closed his eyes. I was scared, he whispered. I was scared of what my parents would think and what society would say. I was scared of being rejected and ostracized. They felt a pang of sadness and regret. She realized that Cassie had been living a lie and that he had been trapped in a prison of his own making. As Cassie's breathing became shallow, Didi held his hand and whispered, I forgive you, Cassie. I forgive you for what you did to me. Cassie told me that he needed to confess that he had other secrets that he needed to let out. Cassie revealed to Didi how he had been molesting younger boys, that he saw it as a revenge for what their houseboy did to him when he was younger. So he does not know where the sickness was coming from, but he was sure that it was karma that was right behind him. Didi was confused. Cassie's eyes flicked open and he smiled weakly at Didi. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you, you're a good woman. Thank you. With those final words, Cassie closed his eyes and took his last breath. Didi was left alone, holding Cassie's lifeless hand. She felt a mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and regret. She was sad that Cassie was gone, but she was also relieved that he was no longer suffering, and she regretted that she had never gotten to know the real Cassie, the one who was hiding behind the mask of a street man. As news of Cassie's death spread, his family and friends gathered to mourn him, but they knew that Cassie's death was not just a tragedy, it was also a liberation. Cassie was finally free from the secrets and lies that had haunted him his whole life. During the funeral, Didi saw a figure standing at the back of the crowd. It was Obi, Cassie's best friend and lover. Didi felt a pang of sadness and regret. She realized that Obi had loved Cassie truly and deeply, and that Cassie had loved him back. As the funeral ended and the crowd began to disperse, Didi approached Obi. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry for not understanding Cassie, for not seeing the real him. Obi looked at her with tears in his eyes. You don't know, he said. Do you know that Cassie was going through a lot? But I do. I know what it's like to love someone who is trapped in a prison of their own making. Didi felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to Obi's words. She realized that she had been so focused on her own pain and suffering that she had neglected to see the pain and suffering of others. As Didi and Obi parted ways, Didi felt a sense of closure and new beginnings. She knew that she still had a long way to go, but she was determined to learn from her mistakes and to become a better person. The days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months. Didi slowly began to rebuild herself, rebuild her life. She started taking classes and pursuing her passions. She made new friends and formed new connections. And though she still thought about Cassie from time to time, she no longer felt the pain and anger that she had once felt. Instead, she felt a sense of compassion and understanding. She realized that Cassie had been a complex and multifaceted person, full of contradictions and paradoxes. As Nidhi looked back on her time with Cassie, she realized that she had learned a valuable lesson. She had learned that people are not always what they seem, and that sometimes the most unlikely people can hold the deepest secret and the greatest pain. And so, that is the end of this tragic story. Thank you so much for listening up to this moment. Remember to like, share, subscribe on the notification bell so once I post new videos, you'll be notified. Let us hear in the comment section where you're watching from. Please, if you skip adverts, please stop skipping. Kindly watch, okay? I'll see you in my next video, guys. For now, hope you enjoyed.